Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, November 21st, 2024, as we bring you a new episode. I am officially back from vacation, and boy, did I miss some White Sox news. Before I left, the White Sox were going to bring in new director of hitting, former Baltimore Orioles hitting coach Ryan Fuller. Since I've been away, our beat reporter James Fegan caught up with Fuller and is providing a lot of insight on what's to come for the White Sox and trying to help revamp the offense. Then new manager Will Venable on Foul Territory told former White Sox catcher A.J. Brzezinski that his new bench coach will be Walker McKinven, former run prevention coordinator for the Milwaukee Brewers and big part in the Brew Crew's game planning activities. And then the White Sox signed their first free agent of the offseason. You guessed it, outfielder Austin Slater. Well, James guessed it back in October, but Slater is going to try to help out with the efforts in right field for the White Sox in 2025. In this episode, I'm going to try to catch up in what I missed out and while I was away and ponder what's next for the White Sox. Joining me to help fill in the gaps are Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And hello, gents. While James was away on vacation, the White Sox hired a new manager. While I'm away, the White Sox get super busy. Now that we are both back, Jim, I guess the White Sox don't do anything else until the winter meetings, right?
Probably. I mean, I'm very happy that you guys were able to cavort and caper and gallivant around Europe. I enjoyed seeing your Instagram posts and was not at all jealous or resentful. But yeah, now that I don't, I have the full staff back in working order. I imagine it'll quiet down. Thanksgiving is around the corner. I imagine Chris Getz will want to spend it as quiet as possible, and you'll get ready for the winter meeting. So yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Good times.
When you go on vacation is when Garrett Crochet gets traded. That's what I'm thinking now, Jim.
So that'll be like May. A month into the season. Got it.
I wish Getz had an Instagram so like people could be like him wanting him to do more, and there's just like story updates of like him making an extremely elaborate turducken like hour by hour.
Was it like Keith Law does the spatchcock or something like that, like the live Instagram live of it, like it's Getz doing the same thing while just a torrent of comments just insulting him for the 121 loss season and why aren't you doing more, and he's just not paying attention at all.
It's just like, I'm going to smoke this thing for 24 hours.
Yep. And now we wait.
And watch it.
It's like one of those cooking shows, like, except it's cooking show in real time. It's not the one where they pull out what they just, we're going to put this in the oven, and after 2 hours, here's what it looks like. And this time it's, and now we wait. They turn on the light in the oven and just look. Yeah, no, I would like that. I imagine like Getz has an Instagram account, like Rick Hahn had a burner account.
Right.
That he never had a public facing account, but loved to tell you just about like how wrong you were in a tweet or something like that. So
I'm hoping that Rick Hahn's real Twitter account is maybe Rick Hahn. I'm still hopeful that is his real Twitter account. Speaking of like Thanksgiving, because again, that's next week, who in baseball Twitter again does the pies?
Craig Goldstein.
Is that Goldstein?
Craig Goldstein.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm super envious.
Chork.
Yes, Chork.
Chorky,
like,
Chuggo, Juggalo.
If there was a GM who like, especially now with like the Soto negotiations going, is just like tweeting out pictures of pies like hour by hour as their fan base loses. Like, who's the Mets GM? Stearns. If Stearns is just tweeting out pies while Mets fans are losing their minds, like that would be That would be the thing to put Blue Sky back on the map or on the map this time.
I hope that happens. Yeah, other fan bases. Well, yeah, some fan bases get to explore and talk about what possibly went down in their meetings with Juan Soto. Don't worry, White Sox fans. I don't think they have a meeting scheduled with Juan Soto and Scott Boras upcoming. But we'll talk about what the White Sox have done in free agency. But while I was away, and like I mentioned in the intro, we knew that Ryan Fuller would be joining the Chicago White Sox in some capacity. I was able to hear that from a source, tweet it out. Couldn't confirm exactly what his role was. We learned that it was going to be the director of hitting. And since I was away recently, James, you got a chance to sit down with Ryan Fuller, and I highly recommend it for everyone that reads Sox Machine. If you haven't checked in daily, because I get it, it's the off season, I would highly recommend reading that article that James put a lot of effort into and asked great questions to Fuller on how this White Sox offense is going to try to improve in year one and beyond with Fuller now as the director of hitting. James, what were your impressions when speaking with Ryan Fuller and what he is going to bring to the White Sox front office?
Well, he was very excited to do it because he said he wants to have a relationship with everyone in White Sox media and be very conversational. So at least for my purposes, that sounds great. He gets literally we joked about, is there a Brian Bannister hitting? And then, White Sox people are kind of like, well, we'll find out. And, that's almost blatantly how they're telling him. He's definitely a different type of dude. Not that Brian Bannister's not very savvy in the baseball world, but you get more the vibe of all right, this is a different sort of thinker than the normal everyday person. Whereas and it speaks to Fuller talking a bit more about coordinating everyone, is that he sounds like somebody who gives a lot of PowerPoints to hitters on their whatever their plan is as far as development. It's a very he was a high school English teacher for a few years, so it's very much like someone knocking out a presentation type of talk a lot. But he will allude to things that I think are what we associate a lot with kind of new age hitting guys, where he talks about being comfortable working with VR and how he wants to use spin machines to do really high intensity practice reps before games and not as much traditional batting practice. And he definitely seems competent or savvy or comfortable working with biomechanical data and talking about working with the research development team. But it seemed notable, and especially in the context of people talking about the situation where he departed Baltimore, when it was seen as this team that's done a really good job of turning out a lot of guys who hit for power, who launch and lift the ball, but weren't able to kind of make this adjustment to be a more manufacturing based team when they went cold in the second half last year. And, talked to some Orioles who, defended him, but also, Fuller just sounds like someone who either isn't wired that way to be kind of we're just trying to hit home runs, drive the ball, do all the maximalist things, and it's going to shake out in the end. Someone who really speaks to we need to be able to do different things. We need to be able to swing on different planes. We can't just be a swing up team or crush low fastballs, because that's not all we're going to get. We need to be situational in times where the game's call for it. We're not going to count on hitting eight extra base hits the night we're facing Blake Snell. We have to be geared to win those sorts of games by manufacturing or doing more tactical at bats, so to speak, but also need to play those games where it's 12 to 11 and it's late August, the wind's blowing out, stuff like that. And the way he talks about the different adjustments he wants hitters to make, he wasn't super on board with it, just because it seemed overstepping on his part. But it reminded me a lot of when I did this story, talking to people why they like Balkan Erica or why they found him fascinating. And it's kind of a cliche to hear baseball players talk about adjustments, but given how much time was spent last year, Andrew Benintendi trying to find a leg kick, or Luis Robert trying not to chase, but seemingly performing weirdly poor on fastballs, given he's, the bat speed merchant. And him talking about a lot of different things that you need to be able to do to be on time when the league adjusts to you and starts pitching you a different way and being versatile. It felt it was very much like someone who's tech savvy and of 2024, but kind of weaving in some concepts that maybe don't sound as niche or like with the new wave when old school guys talk about it, but something I think is important on a game-to-game basis or even over the course of a long season to be more versatile and not have like kind of this one-size-fits-all approach to what good hitting is, where it's like as much as it's broadly true, ball go far, team go far, not every single moment of the game is ball go far, and being prepared for that as well.
So my follow-up, James, is for Ryan and this whole initiative for the White Sox, trying new methods, is the immediate buy-in, because he's no longer with the team, but Eloy Jimenez, which we talked about at great length, just wanted to know how fast pitches were coming to him and would go straight to the plate and swing. And that's just not a good way. It's not a good strategy in today's baseball.
Robert said stuff like that as well in the past.
Yeah. So how did Ryan mention, or did that part of the conversation ever come up? Like, how is he going to, as the new guy, get buy-in to these new methods?
I mean, to pick Robert as an example, he said like we have to have the verbiage that connects with him. We have to find what connects with him. And obviously he didn't want to like really cast aspersions or really speak like he knew what happened with Robert. But clearly if he's saying like, I was trying not to chase and I felt like I was passive and late on fastballs all the time. He's like, well, what we need to approach Robert with is not, don't chase, don't swing at these pitches, and like kind of like have him kind of a little afraid of his shadow in the box there and all these things that he's not supposed to do, but more like, this is the zone you're looking for. You absolutely explode on it. That's all you're looking for. If you don't get it, take a walk, take a strikeout looking. This is how we define success for you. This is like the thing you want to fulfill. This is a positive like result you want to chase, as opposed to don't do this, and hope that what he does best still shines through. What's the specific thing that works for Luis? Is it specifically going to come from Fuller directly, or is it more about just how the team approaches it more, or is it even just a lot of what Robert himself is going to do in the offseason, seeing as he sounded pretty frustrated and obviously has his own guy that he's been working with for several years? It's going to be hard to necessarily, there'll be a lot of authors if it's a successful season, and that's a bit more maybe this Robert guy is just not adjusting if it's a bad season. So we'll kind of see, but he mentioned like having kind of years of patience with Andrew Vaughn, and I think it's not so much like going forward, but not being phased that someone who's 26 is still mainly struggling with swing decisions. And some of that could be like we're at this point of exhaustion for Vaughn, having seen this so many years and kind of not seen a big leap forward. But maybe Fuller's coming from the outside, if he's just looking at the first base free agent market and what's available to make a reclamation project out of, is what's more appealing to him? 30-something Rowdy Tellez is a free agent, or Andrew Vaughn, this former third overall pick, who's not awful, not overmatched in the majors, but hasn't quite clicked in the way and has these kind of record skills where you've seen at least 20 home run power, ability to post a sub 20 strikeout rate. If he's still working with the Orioles, that probably looks like, yeah, I bet we can turn that around. I bet we'd all be chewing our fingernails off if the Orioles picked up Andrew Vaughn after being non-tendered. To be like, wow, it's probably going to look really bad in 6 months. I think we'd all have that expectation. And obviously the White Sox haven't earned that sort of credibility to do it, but I understand why Fuller kind of looks at it with new eyes of saying like, well, didn't really get to play in the minors, doesn't have that much track record, or at least miles compared to like, some of the guys we're considering free agency. Good contact skill, good power, has been working on his mechanics a lot to adjust the velocity, but then the swing decisions aren't there. Like, we've had some fixes with swing decisions. We here in White Sox land kind of roll our eyes like, oh boy, brother, another 500 plate appearances to find out what's going on with this guy in his late 20s. He obviously has kind of a more fresh mind about it.
Just need 1,000 more plate appearances for Lenin Sosa, and we'll finally figure out what his role is in the major leagues.
I don't think he minds telling, but one of the Jordan Schusterman is suspended barbecue just like texts me this week like, are you aware of what Lennon Sosa's doing? Like with no context. And there's at least a moment to consider like that he's like been arrested. It's just like, no, he's slugging 800 in the Venezuelan league. It's like, well,
Lenyn Sosa, first baseman. I'm kind of on that train in terms
he
of
looks
like
outstanding there. He's a two-way impact player there.
Yeah, I said Lenyn Sosa, first baseman, as a joke initially, but the more I say it, the more I start believing in it. But yeah, like with Fuller, like a couple things struck me as one, he seems like the kind of hitting coach that isn't, he doesn't like design his like, I guess, rhetoric around selling t-shirts, which I think is a little bit different. Like there aren't a whole lot of like, slogans coming out of him or jargon or truisms. It's more, like he's somebody who doesn't mind Luis Ariz, which I think is, a lot of hitting coaches wouldn't necessarily bring him up in one, in the same breath as, Luis Robert, Aaron Judge are type of sluggers, but like seems like he's willing to work with anybody versus trying to make sluggers or ball lifters out of everybody. So there's like that. The other thing that strikes me is that like he has a mandate, which I don't think we've seen with the White Sox. We've seen them hire, like Matt Lyle was their first big attempt at bringing in a new age hitting guru, but like it lasted 1 year and it wasn't clear like what say he had or like who he was in charge of or whether anybody was listening to him. Then they brought in Devin DeYoung and Ryan Johansson, and they were more tasked with the minor leagues, probably especially low minors, making changes. But here I think you have a first case of here's somebody who, without like major league experience, without the traditional major league coaching experience path, who was, given those reins with Baltimore, succeeded. Everybody in Baltimore seemed to say great things about him. And now he comes in this White Sox job with, and one of the reasons why it's probably appealing to him, no matter that he's going to, a state-of-the-art organization like the Orioles to a 121-loss White Sox team, is that he has this mandate. He has the ability to, have some say in the talent. And even if he doesn't have like 100% say in this roster, like if he does get Andrew Vaughn because they looked at the first baseman market and nobody's really that enthused about Tellez, or nobody wants to win a bidding war for Carlos Santana, that they say, one more year of Andrew Vaughn. Well, non-tender Gavin Sheets, so there will be one fewer first base DH candidate to have to endure, and we can use those plate appearances from Miguel Vargas or Brian Ramos, whoever. Like there will be abilities to be flexible around Andrew Vaughn if he continues to be unremarkable, but let's continue with Andrew Vaughn. Like if the first year of a White Sox offense under Ryan Fuller does not go well, like he will still be there to try to influence the next group of hitters they bring up, the next group of prospects that hopefully have seen some strides in development with the White Sox system. So that I think is really the most encouraging thing about him, no matter how this first year goes, is that it seems like he's empowered to provide like 2-3 years of let's see if this works versus the White Sox following what other teams are doing, but not really empowering that person to actually see results in a fashion, and seems like from what James has written that, maybe they aren't going to hire 60 new people in the front office, or they're not going to overhaul the entire equipment at every single affiliate, but it does seem like they are going to invest more in the behind the scenes stuff, in the developmental stuff, in the practice stuff that actually allows people to get better versus making some token adjustments, having one machine that everybody shares that they have to lug around and maybe, convince people to bring on the road. And it's kind of a more of a gimmick or something they can point to versus an actual structure they're building with developments. Like, I think that's the most important thing. I'm hoping to see immediate results. It would be cool if there were exciting under the radar finds, like if Vaughn turns into the White Sox version of Ryan O'Hearn, except like Ryan O'Hearn didn't have to leave a different organization. He just improved with the organization he was originally with. But that's what I'm looking for, I think, with Fuller, is not necessarily an immediate turnaround, but a consistent, I guess, language and approach to developing hitters and helping them improve over the course of either 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years.
Yeah, because I think for immediate impact, after reading James's interview with Ryan Fuller, my takeaway is, like, with Luis Robert, it'd be great that the White Sox could break through to him, but there's also a give and take in that relationship. It's definitely a two-way street. Again, Jose Abreu is trying to make a comeback. Yohan Moncada has now signed on to the same team that Jose Abreu is currently playing in winter ball, so Yohan Moncada could improve his chances of getting signed this free agency. Eloy Jimenez may not get signed in this offseason. That follows Tim Anderson signing with Miami and then being non-tendered during the season. Luis Robert, you're next. Out of all the ex-White Sox core, none of them could be in the major leagues in 2025. That is a realistic possibility. If you do not open yourself up to new suggestions and new methods, and you walk in 2025 the way that you ended in 2024, I assure you, Luis, you will be a free agent after the 2025 season, because there's no way the White Sox are going to pick up that club option. No way. So that's on Robert. But I'm with you, Jim. Like, year one is going to be tough to see what the immediate impact is going to be for Ryan, what he brings to the White Sox. So that's why I'm paying attention more to how can he help Andrew Vaughn? How can he help Colson Montgomery? Because in that interview, James, something that I picked up on in the conversation that we had when we talked about Montgomery's struggles in 2024 and how things did pick up in September. And if you listen to the previous Sox Machine podcast, I had Jim Callis from MLB.com talk about the Arizona Fall League performance for Colson Montgomery. He seems a lot more confident now about his play and is excited about 2025. But this idea of hitters having multiple bat paths, James, I'm wondering if that's the type of impact that we see immediately, is that Colson Montgomery can hit different types of pitches. It does not have to live in the middle of the zone. And maybe, just maybe, Andrew Vaughn can start hitting breaking pitches better.
You're not going to make a guy like just a lead at crushing top of the zone and bottom of the zone at the same time, unless like you're going to sign Juan Soto, which is ridiculous. So I think it's about having more tools in guys' bags to kind of keep themselves alive or keep their opposition honest as far as like what way they get attacked or exploited, and obviously, hopefully, minimize some of your long slumps, because I think you could probably point to a lot of guys who last season maybe are in a lot more respectable place if like a slump was half the length it was. Like Andrew Vaughn's numbers probably looking kind with the last 2 years if he doesn't have like those first 6 weeks in April that he really couldn't get stopped in any kind of short order. Evan Sheets probably is a lot closer to respectable, or like even kind of 110, 115 WRC plus guy against right-handers if he doesn't have some of these like month-long power outages that he can't get out of for stretches. I think Corey Lee's season's probably a bit more about like the one hot streak than like the one cold streak, but like obviously those stretches like went on a bit longer than have. I think it's kind of adding certainly as someone who's getting attacked in a similar way consistently, and like Lee would make him a lot more viable as at least as a long-term kind of backup guy who plays pretty often. So I think that's kind of what he's talking about with the multiple swing angles. Like there's always going to be something that's like kind of preference of the strength, but just making it a bit more viable, making it a bit more malleable, adjustable. Like we didn't want to see Paul Konerko hitting singles to right field all the time. That was what 2014 was. It was a little depressing. But like it made him so much harder to kind of pin down. And when he's going through the stretches of guys where really he's not getting anything, he can drive and still helping the team. So I think he's viewing a team that can't be pinned down or completely shut down as easily, even if it's, there's always going to be a tendency of where their real strength lies and what matchups really do suit them best.
The White Sox offense was so bad last year. Like it's not like I'm giving Ryan Fuller a pass, but there's a lot of work to be done here. But I also think that we have to leave the door open to be immediately impressed, Jim, because Brian Bannister came in this brand new role And with the work that he did with guys like Jonathan Cannon and Davis Martin, like we're talking about on how he's helping some of the internal starting pitching options that the White Sox have manifesting into guys that are going to be part of the rotation in 2025. So while I do not want to put any type of pressure on Ryan Fuller, because there's so much work to be done, Jim, I am leaving the door to be optimistic about what he is bringing to the Chicago White Sox organization, because it is much needed. And we'll see, maybe a couple guys do break out and it does make this team much more enjoyable to watch.
Well, and the comparison to Bannister too is, I guess the cynical interpretation would be like, if you're moving from Baltimore to the White Sox, why? And in a case like Fuller, if you're a co-hitting coach of a team with expectations and things go south or wayward as they did over the last 2 months, and all of a sudden you go from being like the architect of a great thing to being blamed for situational hitting and why they're not cashing in with runners in scoring position, to go from that job to the White Sox. And I think we saw this with Bannister, to where like when things went well, like Bannister gets a lot of credit for a tweak, a change in approach, figuring out a new pitch for a guy to enhance an arsenal, versus like when the White Sox have the worst pitching staff in baseball, that's Ethan Katz. Like Ethan Katz is the reason why the bullpen is not working. Brian Bannister is the reason why like Jonathan Cannon is surprisingly good. Like I think that's really the advantage, I think, of being in this more remote role, is that you're not there every day to be saddled with the performances. Like say if the roster just isn't that good, that's not going to be Ryan Fuller's fault the way it might be attached to Marcus Timms if he's actually still the hitting coach, and that's still not official. But I think that's one of the reasons why this job might appeal to him, is that long view of being able to have some say in who is being acquired, be able to get your hands dirty in spring training and maybe in the minor leagues, maybe be able to parachute in with the majors and have like a good idea without something that requires, real actual work and at major league game speed and games that count, which I think coaches are loath to do. But if things go well and you acquire a guy, like you're a hero. And if you have a low hit rate in your first year, that's not necessarily your problem.
Well, let's move over to the White Sox first free agent signing of this offseason, and it's Austin Slater.
Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
And Slater is signed to the Paul DeJong contract, a 1-year guaranteed contract of $1.75 million with a few $100,000 available in incentives. This type of contract, I believe, worked out great for the White Sox last year. I know there's a lot of skepticism about bringing in Paul DeJong to replace Tim Anderson. In some ways, that did work out for the White Sox. Paul DeJong was leading the team in home runs until the final week of the regular season, and they were still able to get something interesting from DeJong in trading him to Kansas City in July. Not saying that Austin Slater is necessarily trade bait, but Austin Slater did play for 3 teams last year in 2024, in which he played 84 games, hit .209 with a .321 on base percentage and slugging .266. If that doesn't give you a lot of optimism, I don't blame you, but from the White Sox perspective, they're really looking at what he did with the Baltimore Orioles, which Ryan Fuller, again, was a hitting coach for in 33 games, batted .246 with a .342 on base percentage. So James, Austin Slater, first free agent signing this offseason for the White Sox. What are the White Sox hoping for from Austin Slater, and how does Austin Slater help the White Sox?
He's been a good hitter against left-handed hitters when healthy. Like I think the comparison I put to DeJong is like DeJong was probably on a multi-year cycle as far as kind of coming down from where he had been at his peak as a player. Whereas Slater, it's kind of, it was 4 straight years of mashing lefties. Then he has concussion in May, gets traded twice, is moving while his wife is pregnant, has a bad year, but it's one kind of what year. There's a pretty good explanation for why he wasn't right, or why, a concussion could get you off timing wise and mechanically. And, it's already kind of a difficult role to keep your rhythm in, because it's the short side of a platoon. It can have long absences in it, and that's something he gets praised for kind of handling, but it is still difficult. It's pretty easy to see him, or it probably takes less projection to just see him at least getting on base at above average rate, where he's someone you prefer to be in the starting lineup in the outfield when you have a left-handed opposing starter, or at least run it out there, rather than have Gavin Sheets face a lefty late in the game, or Dominic Fletcher, or whatever situation might be, which you certainly saw a lot of, just because they didn't have the pieces to do much else last season. Perfectly cromulent. Like it's that, like, I don't know. It's tweeting out his quote today about being the top target felt like the meme of the cat being yelled at the dinner table a little bit, and that's Austin Slater. Like, if you're going to get, like, if you're the White Sox and you see right field as what it is, like, as far as getting a starter on the market, all right, is this your long-term guy when you're in the middle of a rebuild? You're probably not shopping at that level. You're probably not even shopping at the level of just like what a average to better starting right fielder every day is going to cost. Like, it's probably not the level that they're really shopping at either. So at that point, you look at your current crop in house, and it's a lot of lefty outfielders. It's mostly, I think if you put Fletcher at the top of the heap, kind of a glove first guy, and really, if you make him bat left on left a lot, that's going to make it way too hard for him to carry that profile already. And even if something less expected happens, where Zach DeLoach, who looked good in the last week of the season, can be the strong side of the platoon and be respectable, put up Austin Slater numbers, or Oscar Colas, comes back from, basically kind of being an afterthought a lot of last season from the org, they would need a platoon partner. Slater fits that bill. If he, he's not going to be, a hot commodity at the deadline, but he's a useful player at the deadline. That's a sort of like small role players that contending teams would acquire, not for a lot, but you looked at Harold Rosario's numbers in Winston-Salem, you sure wouldn't mind another one, and that's kind of the level you would hope for success-wise. It's also very much like, I think the guarantee is kind of a give and take as far as getting him. Like, he gets a base of 175, $500,000 performance bonuses. It's very easy to see him getting to the level of that NRI where it's $2 million if you make the roster, that so many other guys wind up signing late. But now the alternative is like, hey, you're guaranteed you're getting most of it no matter what, and you don't have to stress out this whole making the team thing in spring, and the same amount of money that you would get from a successful season under this deal is what you'd get if you played your way onto a regular roster spot with the NRI that you're probably looking at late February. So yes, it always looks weird because it's the first thing. It makes it a false sense that it's the biggest priority, and then Slater comes and says it's the top target. I think it makes a lot more sense. Like, that's their prime solution for how to right field. If they're not going to go like big, they kind of have to complement what they have in house, and he fits the bill as anyone to do it. As I said, I think, like, especially the White Sox, you're kind of looking to pay low on the starter, the acquisition costs, and raise them up, as opposed to like paying market price for Randall Grichuk, who was really good in that role, and thus earned himself a higher salary, and hoping he can just repeat it. You're looking for Austin Slater to kind of raise his stock over the course of his time with you. I think there's probably, and it'd be an ideal world where maybe they acquire, one of the pieces of Crochet trade is like a corner outfielder who really like boosts that slot's long-term potential more down the road. The likelihood that someone is also major league ready at the same time, I think that's a little slight. I think that's probably a pretty small crop of potential prospects that are both like basically quad A, but also your long-term answer. So in the likelihood that you probably don't get that, maybe you find your long-term right fielder, but he's, crushed A ball last year and hasn't hit double A yet. even then Slater kind of makes sense as, a stopgap for that, and better than just relying on internal depth and like watching the roof you knew was going to cave in. To not step on Jim's point, obviously, a very high likelihood that he could stretch beyond just platoon guy, because that's something like good teams do, where they have a guy like, man, he's good in this role. If only there was room for him to do more. Like, that's not the way things usually shake out for the White Sox, but at least there's theoretically a job for him to do that he's done before that you're signing him up for, even if his job might get bigger than that.
Yeah, that was going to be my question to you, Jim. Someone that has written about the White Sox forever. While in theory, bringing in Austin Slater to be your fourth outfielder who can provide quality at-bats against the American League Cy Young winner in 2024, Tarek Skubal. We know that the Kansas City Royals have a great one as well in Cole Reagans. Makes a ton of sense, especially if you get that type of outfielder for $1.75 million with some incentives to dangle the carrot in front of him. But this is the White Sox, and I have a feeling Austin Slater's career high is 129 games played in 2021. I'm not saying he's going to reach 129 games played with the White Sox in 2025, but I'm also not saying he's going to make that number. How big of a risk here is the overexposure for Slater with the current White Sox roster situation?
In terms of like likelihood, I would say it's high. In terms of impact, I would say low, just because we've lived this reality many times. Like just last year with Kevin Pillar, seeing him brought in for the same role, right-handed fourth outfielder, helping to nurse along Dominic Fletcher in a corner, but also back up Luis Robert in center field. And then the White Sox get tired of him, or like they just never really gave him a chance. Maybe it got off on the wrong foot with having to restructure his contract because they signed him for like his minor league deal was worth too much in the majors, and they had to revise it. And so maybe it was just a weird kind of poison start. Never gets his footing with the White Sox. Goes the Angels and like does what he's supposed to do with the Angels over 80 games, but not enough to get traded. So he remained with the Angels for the rest of the year. Like I think that's the most likely path. We've seen the White Sox do this often. I think, that's why there's a lot of irritation with Slater. It's not necessarily Slater himself, because Michael Baumann on Fangraphs had an article about like what players sign before Thanksgiving. And he does fit that mold of players who sign before Thanksgiving, players who are happy to get a major league deal, but are also useful, have a specific use. A lot of teams can put that guy to use and understand what they're getting. And so that's why they rush to sign somebody like him. That's why he accepts a deal. Another group of players that fit that mold are like veteran innings eaters or veteran pitchers who might be on the verge of decline, but they typically sign 2-year deals for a certain cost. So they sign early as well. So, I mean, there are useful players who sign this early. So I think that's why like the deal itself doesn't bother me, but I think the idea of just trying to put together a very delicate arrangement in the outfield. We've seen this over and over again. Like I would say, from John Jay to Norm Mazzara to Adam Eaton the second time, just a lot of guys who we're not expecting greatness. If you can only do this one thing, we have another guy who only does one thing. And if everybody stays healthy and we never have to expose you to weakness, we're going to get an average performance. And 2 wins above replacement is all we're looking for. And that's all we could be expected to get. We'll be happy if we get it. And then they get like 1.5 wins below replacement because something goes wrong, something gives way, Fletcher stretched into center, Colas never pans out, etc. And because they don't have any upside, it's all downside. Like the possibilities of things going haywire is way more distinct than the possibility of like 2 guys overachieving, which is what it takes to get like this really upper echelon outcome from such low ceiling players. So I think that's where the frustration lies. I think my hope or my solace is that maybe this is like one more year of this. Like I can give Getz a pass for like just based on the kind of salary they're cutting, based on coming off 121 loss season, that investing very little And we'll see what kind of guys they bring in NRIs or Rule 5 or what have you to try to provide some upside or give Ryan Fuller some projects. But I think like halfway in the season, I'll have a better idea of just what their problem solving capacity is. Because I think that was my frustration with the previous administration, is just terrible problem solving. Very good, like Rick Hahn's strength was like signing promising players or good players to extensions. Like that was his that was his big stick when it came to just pressing a strength. And as players got wise to the fact that early career extensions were basically giving the team money, that became more and more expensive. They had to take on more and more risk, and then Hahn's special skill eroded on him. But when it came to like solving problems in season, when it came to finding bargains, like couldn't do it. They got what they paid for by and large. And I think Slater is in that vein of, if it doesn't pan out, you'll understand why. But I think like just given the economics of the situation, given where they're coming from, given that they have made legitimate changes under the hood, trying to improve their processes, trying to improve their evaluation, trying to come at it from a different angle. If they need to buy themselves time for those changes to take root, I get it. But I also understand if everybody's just kind of tired of this situation where, like, at best, they're going to get like 15 homers out of right field, and that's seen as like a great outcome because they'll be like one win above replacement of the season. That's way better than they've done in the last 5 years. I think that's where it gets pretty old.
I would be ecstatic if the 2025 White Sox get 15 home runs out of right field.
Those are the standards.
I'm thinking like 8 with what they currently have on hand. Maybe, just maybe, though, Ryan Fuller can make some magic. Austin Slater, again, was worth half a win above replacement, according to Baseball Reference, in 33 games with the Orioles last year. If he can come in hitting .250 and have a .340 on base percentage, batting 8th or 9th in the lineup, maybe that helps the White Sox. At least somebody to consistently get on base and see what the top of the order can do for the White Sox. I know Dominic Fletcher can play defense. That's what I do know about Fletcher. The bat is going to be a big question for him coming to 2025. Does he have staying power in the majors? And is Oscar Colas even an option in right field? Like, do we even talk about him anymore? Is there a path forward with Colas at this organization?
You think he's batting 8th or 9th? I'm putting him like 9.5 appearances in the cleanup spot.
James also chuckled for podcast listeners when Jim said this would be the last year the White Sox signed someone for 1 year.
Not saying it would be. Yeah, it's unlikely, but I'm just like, we can write it off as like a lost year if it happens. But yeah, that's the reason why, like, every year is supposed to be the last year that this is supposed to be the arrangement, and it keeps happening. I was looking it up, the splits, and the White Sox got 5 homers from the right fielders last year. They got 6 homers from second base, where Nicky Lopez was the leader in playing time with 1. They got 3 homers from pinch hitters. So they had nearly as many homers from pinch hitters as they did from the right fielders.
I was also laughing when you did the Luis Robert, you will be a free agent if you don't get it together, like really threatening him with a good time type of situation.
Listen, we have tried mockery. We have tried unbridled optimism to pump guys up. Now I'm just going to use reality, being like,
smoke this whole pack of cigarettes. Yeah. See how you like it.
Like get the LeBron where he's like fake, like scared. Like, ooh.
Robert's going to have a great year in 2025. Going to speak that into existence so we do not have to worry about that. If I were his agent, be like, yeah, let's really focus and hunker down this offseason because your ex-teammates.
Let's get you traded.
There you go. There you go. That's the mindset. Let's play so awesome in the first half that you get traded to a contender in the second half of 2025. Jim mentioned better preparation and better planning for the White Sox. Well, that sounds like why Will Venable, the new manager of the Chicago White Sox, along with the White Sox front office, have hired former run prevention coordinator of the Milwaukee Brewers, Walker McKinven. And James, as a former New Trier grad, one, how did Rick Hahn not hire this guy earlier when Hahn was the GM for the White Sox? I kid. But McKinven, what have you heard from speaking with people around baseball about the job that he did with the Milwaukee Brewers and what he could possibly bring to the White Sox clubhouse?
The Brewers think he's good and wish he did not do this. It's what I have heard. Certainly the local connection seems like it was in play. Certainly someone who was part of seemingly why both they've been really good at run prevention in general, run prevention coordinator. But like obviously their pitching has done well. But I've seen them take a lot of guys that a lot of organizations didn't really think could frame. William Contreras and Omar Narvaez come to mind, and have them post seasons. In Narvaez's case, that he hasn't really been able to replicate outside of Milwaukee in terms of framing numbers. And William Contreras, a situation where almost everyone believed in the bat, but then he becomes like a DH and just not like this core player. All of a sudden, is an all-star because you've made him a plus framer. The White Sox weren't, I think the last couple of years you've seen them kind of sign veteran catchers where even if like they're intended, even if it worked out, like James McCann's like 2019 comes as an example, they almost are intending to take a bath offensively because they're willing to sacrifice that for kind of the game managing that the pitchers need, but they're only able to kind of acquire it on the market for guys who's like have this reputation but don't really drive their costs with their bat. And you saw them kind of definitely and as a rookie catcher, so I think it's kind of a natural situation to be in given that they put such a load on him. But felt like Corey Lee was a work in progress. A lot of things like they did game managing, something they kind of had to teach him on the job a lot last year. So having more resources oriented towards that, like obviously they had a catching coach with Drew Patera, a lot of things with technique, got him to like great pop time, but just like having someone, the bench coach, or having someone is really well versed as McKinven seems to be in terms of involving the catcher into the pitching plan and having that cohere through the game and not just say a bunch of nice things of what they want to do in the pregame meeting. It seems like he's excelled at that, and that's certainly an area where both they want to grow from where they are last year, and also whether opening day, whether later, you have your very young still catcher of the future in Edgar Caro, probably debuting next season. And that's something where you want as many resources as you can to really get to the off the ground, because I think we've seen how there being a really big learning curve for their catchers that they're trying to bring in, either kind of really stall their progress to really having opportunity to get rolling or get everyday playing time with Zach Collins, who never really got that trust to be the everyday guy in terms of defense, or to really see what his bat would do in a prolonged role. Or someone like Tyler Flowers, who just saw like his offense being really erratic as he's kind of getting the hold of the position in real time. So you don't want that kind of, as much as the old adage is catchers develop weird, it's not beyond the pale to see a bad first catching prospect not really hit a ton of his pre-R before he gets comfortable with the workload and all these things he has to do defensively. You want to make that learning curve as little as possible, given just in general and what you have coming at the position, this next coming season.
Since you mentioned Omar Narvaez, looked at the free agent list from MLB.com. Old friend Omar is a free agent. Maybe, just maybe, the White Sox have a reunion. We'll see. Only 3 catchers have signed so far. The latest, Jacob Stallings, signing a 1-year deal with the Colorado Rockies. So Diaz is still on the board, James. We talked about him a few podcasts ago.
Dream scenario: James McCann, Reese McGuire, Yasmani Grandal, Omar Narvaez, all somehow get them on NRIs and have them fight it out like with a pool cue like snapped in the middle of the room.
I thought 4 catchers on the 26-man roster. Everybody gets a personal catcher.
They open the door. They're all at peace. They've glued the pool cools back together. Like, we're ready. And they carry 4 catchers.
So Jim, when the White Sox hired Pedro Grifol, they may have hired ex-manager Charlie Montoyo first before hiring Pedro. to be that kind of experienced guy that Pedro could lean on to help with game planning and helping with the clubhouse. Will Venable, first-time manager, is now getting Walker McKinven, first-time bench coach. So you have two guys going into these roles in 2025, never having done this job before. Is that a concern for you? And are there other areas within the organization that you're hoping that McKinven can help the White Sox like he helped with the Brewers?
No, it's not a concern just because after a 121 loss season where they did follow a template of first-time manager with an experienced bench coach, and like Montoyo was a bench coach for a successful organization, then he was a middling manager for a decent team, and then he comes back to the bench coach role. You should think he's overqualified, and he didn't really make a difference. I think James is still waiting on his one-on-one to have a, I think if McKinven grants him an interview, it'll be one more than Montoyo ever did with like any member of Chicago media. So, that'll be new. But I think you're going back to Fuller, and like the theme is like you're seeing a process emphasis. And I think like McKinven really seems like he is more on the process side of like game planning, of talent evaluation, of watching him talk about the acquisition of William Contreras and having some ideas of what the Brewers were looking for and like what could be worked with. I think that's kind of a good idea of what kind of role they give Corey Lee early. If they say that Corey Lee is going to be our number one catcher for as long as Edgar Quero is not around, then that would like indicate to me that McKinven thinks like, okay, there's just a way we can get this guy to get more strikes for his pitchers. If he says like, Lee's a backup, we're going to sign somebody else who hopefully has more upside than Martin Maldonado. I think you would more or less see the White Sox, give up on Lee. And not completely rule him out because catchers can be weird, you need depth wherever. And Lee is like a major leaguer of some kind because of catcher depths all over is kind of dicey. That would kind of indicate to me that, they have a set of eyes you trust in this regard. So I think that's why, this is cool. I think in a way that, Montoyo, not exactly sure what he brings because one, he didn't talk, but also just, the White Sox had no strength. So that, when Grifol took over, the preparation was going to be elite. That was his words, like not necessarily Montoyo, but Mike Tozar was somebody he trusted with that. And just nothing ever came of that. And so I think McKinven coming from an organization, and not only the catchers necessarily, but like when you look at Brewers pitchers year over year, had some really impressive pitchers. But last year, when you look at trading Corbin Burns and thinking like, oh, this is going to be a step back. This is going to be, can't rule them out because they're the Brewers, but surely they're not going to beat out the Cubs who just got Counsell, or they're not going to beat out the Cardinals. They're going to be just a respectable third place team. And then they win the AL Central going away, and they get 25 starts from Tobias Myers, who had a nearly 16 ERA with the Charlotte Knights for the month or so he was the White Sox organization. Then he's like, throwing 138 innings. To me, like that's where you might see some of the benefits. Is not necessarily like getting a great catcher, because the Brewers have shown or I should say little hesitance in jumping from catcher to catcher, letting catchers go, bringing guys in. So I wouldn't necessarily think like, if the White Sox don't find their catcher of the future before Edgar Quero is ready to take over, or like, find that if they swing and miss at the catcher market this year while waiting for Quero to take over, I wouldn't take that as a strike against them. I also want to see just like how a Jonathan Cannon does, how a Davis Martin does, how these guys who have been okay starters, who have maybe don't have the most electric stuff or the most the best record of getting swing and misses, either in the minors or the majors, like does their performance elevate because of either better sequencing, better ideas of setting hitters up, better ideas the second time through or third time through? That's kind of what I'm looking for as well. So I think that's what makes it interesting, is not only the catcher angle, but also the fact that the Brewers, I think year over year, have gotten overachievement from their pitching staff, because last year's pitchers like Freddie Peralta, 32 starts, Colin Ray, 27 starts, Myers, 25 starts, nobody else more than 14. And they won 90 something games. So I think, the White Sox necessarily won't see that kind of, I don't think you're going to be impressed by the White Sox pitching staff and saying like, oh, they're going to, there's no path, I think, to 82 wins with this team, but getting better results, feeling like there is a coalescence of this pitching staff that is like Cannon and Thorpe and Martin and Burke, et cetera. Feeling like those gains are more legitimate because there's more thought behind what they're doing from start to start, I think is just as important as maybe what the catchers provide.
And then finally, James, any idea on the other coaches for the White Sox? Are we looking at first base and third base being new faces as well?
I wouldn't be surprised if there was like at least, both retaining the organization, just not knowing, but they've said they expect to announce it relatively soon. Seems like we already know the big ones with Thames and Katz. We really just like McKinven's kind of the first inclination of what Venable is looking for, because that's the one that can really have his stamp on it in terms of being someone from outside the organization that they've added since bringing him on. So, but other than that, it certainly has been emphasized that they're bringing a lot of people back, and it was already a lot of assistants, it seemed, gets driven, or at least the new front office driven, and having relationships with them that were brought in. So like, if Jason Bourgeois was retained, or that wouldn't surprise at all. And if Justin Jersley left the White Sox organization, it would, I don't know, feel like all ran being blown up a little bit. So I certainly expect a lot of consistency, but it'd be nice to kind of, if only just get a feel for Venable, to see some of the external hires. We also just don't know the shape of what the staff will look like, because I think in general the trend we're going to see from we already saw it last year with them kind of having an actual dedicated catching coach, is just kind of bigger staffs and getting a little bit more in line with what other teams do. So
I do hope Jason Bourgeois comes back, just because his only mark on the team is being late to reporting to first base that one inning for reasons.
We had a great talk about like the thoughts behind like taking leads and what goes into it balance wise. That was all in the vein of Duke Ellis like 2 days before they waived him. So maybe that would have been his mark otherwise, explaining stealing bases to the masses. But the fates were not aligned.
No, they were not. And Grady Sizemore is still going to have a role within the White Sox organization. That's been confirmed, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Venable has said like he'll be on the staff. Now, obviously, there's probably room to wiggle with that. But if he's just in uniform, especially with what Grady's talked about, just really appreciating the player group, as much turnover as there is, it would kind of align with what he said he liked about doing the job last year, just competing again and being in a clubhouse and being part of something, was something that he felt was very fun, and probably it's been a long time since he associated kind of being in a dugout and competing on a nightly basis, and not with his own physical pain. It was probably I kind of really enjoy this type of feeling to his final 2 months.
Got it. Vibes coordinator. That's what the White Sox need. They need a Gen Z hire to focus on the clubhouse aura and the vibes.
If it's a Gen Z hire, it's going to be an aura coordinator, not a vibes coordinator. That's like for Austin Slater. For Colson Montgomery, it's going to be an aura coordinator.
So the White Sox find themselves a director of hitting. They have a bench coach and the first free agent signing, right fielder Austin Slater. I should say outfielder. He may get some time in center field as well in 2025.
We're excited about him playing all three positions. So watch your ass, Benintendi. You could be in a Slater book.
More to come for the White Sox this offseason. And of course, we will be covering it on SoxMachine.com. And our next episode will be before Thanksgiving. We'll share what we were thankful for in the 2024 season. Also, some upcoming updates for Sox Machine as well, as we get ready to be reporting at the winter meetings in Dallas, Texas in early December. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. I'm glad to be back. Glad to help contributing on SoxMachine.com. as we cover the daily news regarding the White Sox. You could follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms, including Blue Sky. I know a lot of baseball Twitter has made that transition. More and more sports folks are moving over to Blue Sky. So if you have made that move over to Blue Sky, you could follow Jim, James, and I on Blue Sky. But of course, you could follow us at Sox Machine. You could follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at Sox Machine _Josh on all the other social media platforms. You can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. If you enjoy our work and you want more, you can get more by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Monthly subscriptions are available. We'll provide more information about the annual side in upcoming posts and podcasts as we're making some adjustments on the back end. But you can sign up for a monthly subscription at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Monthly plans start at $5 a month. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.